Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I graduated from college in late 2021, full of those naive dreams everyone has at 23. A marketing startup in Denver had offered me a position. Fresh office, modern workspace, young team, all the Silicon Valley energy you could ask for. For a while, it felt like the perfect escape from small-town Ohio. But by the 6th month, the illusion began to rot. Deadlines stacked higher than coffee cups. Sleep vanished. Every spreadsheet felt like a slow execution. By January 2022, I was crying in the office bathroom, locked in a stall pretending to have food poisoning, just so no one would see me fall apart. 3 hours of sleep per night, takeout containers piling on the floor of my tiny Capitol Hill apartment, and a silent phone mocking me with missed calls from my mother. When my manager finally pulled me into a meeting and asked if I was still happy here, I knew something had to give. So I told HR I needed help. They were surprisingly supportive, or maybe just relieved to move my breakdown into someone else's responsibility. Our company's insurance covered mental health treatment, and HR enthusiastically recommended a facility nearby, Whitestone Behavioral Institute, located in Cherry Creek. It looked pristine on Google, sleek glass building, glowing reviews, and words like innovative therapies and revolutionary mood stabilization programs. That's where I met Dr. Alan Mercer. He was everything you'd imagine a psychiatrist to be. Calm, meticulous, unnervingly composed. Every movement seemed measured, as if he'd practiced it in front of a mirror 100 times. His gray hair shimmered under the fluorescent light, and his pale eyes didn't blink enough. During our first session, he asked me about my stress levels, my sleep, my work, my family. He typed quietly on a tablet, always angled away from my view. After 45 minutes, he gave a soft smile and said, "You're suffering from adjustment disorder with depressive features." "We can help." Then came the invitation, an intensive outpatient program, 3 sessions a week, individual therapy, group counseling, and something called cognitive mood regulation therapy. I signed the papers that same day. The first few weeks felt normal. A counselor named Diane led my one-on-one sessions. She had the kind of gentle voice that could convince you clouds were soft enough to sleep on. She offered herbal tea, asked me about my goals, encouraged journaling. Group therapy was the usual collection of quiet faces, sharing pieces of sadness. I even started sleeping better, or so I thought. Then came the mood regulation sessions. They took place in the basement. No windows, only dim lights and gray walls. Dr. Mercer said the color helped neurological receptivity. I'd sit in a reclining chair, while a technician named Lucas attached sensors to my temples, wrists, and chest. He never spoke, never looked directly at me, just adjusted cables and pressed buttons. Through the headphones came a mix of rhythmic pulses and strange backward murmurs, like voices talking underwater. Sometimes Mercer would inject something into my IV. "Just vitamins," he said. But every time, the world blurred at the edges, and a metallic taste filled my mouth. Soon, the other patients started changing. Brian, a former teacher, developed an odd twitch, constantly tapping his jaw like he was counting something only he could hear. Maya, who'd come for postpartum depression, began speaking in robotic tones, her sentences perfectly structured but emotionless. And Ethan, who always carried a small notebook, began scribbling complex diagrams and time-stamped notes during sessions. We weren't supposed to talk about our treatments. It was forbidden. They said comparing experiences would interfere with therapeutic accuracy. But we all knew something wasn't right. One by one, we started noticing gaps, small blackouts, moments of lost time. You'd blink and suddenly be somewhere else, signing attendance sheets with handwriting that looked like yours, but cleaner. I remember one morning waking up in the facility's garden, dirt on my shoes, though I was sure I'd gone straight home the night before. Then came the reconstruction phase. Dr. Mercer said it was the next step, the neurological remapping of self-perception. They moved me to another wing of the building, one with no labels on the doors, only colored circles. Mine was marked with a yellow dot and 3 gray lines. Inside, the chair had straps. Lucas buckled me in for posture, he said. Then a curved screen lowered in front of my face. It began showing a rapid slideshow, images of landscapes, then personal photos I'd never shared with anyone. My childhood bedroom, my mother's face, screenshots of my old text messages. Between images, single words flashed too quickly to read, but my mouth twitched as if trying to pronounce them. I could feel my mind trying to speak a language it didn't know. After each session, my memory fractured. Not total blackouts, more like pieces of my life slipping between cracks. One afternoon, my sister called and said we'd talked the night before for 20 minutes, except I had no memory of it. She said I'd kept repeating, "Dr. Mercer is helping me see the truth." I started finding notes in my journal I didn't remember writing, clinical-sounding observations about other patients, rating their compliance levels, and something called perceptual pliability. Each note signed with my name in handwriting slightly too neat. That's when Ethan slipped me a folded page during group therapy. It read, "Messy and panicked. They're conditioning us. Check your diagnosis. They're changing it." He'd drawn a crude map of the administrative wing and marked times when staff rotations left it briefly unguarded. That night, I waited until 3 a.m. when the halls went quiet. The buzzing in my veins from the IV made it hard to walk straight, but I followed Ethan's map. The records room was behind a door labeled "Only Staff Access." Inside, metal cabinets lined the walls. I found my folder marked Patient ID 042-B, thicker than it should have been. The first page was the diagnosis I'd signed, adjustment disorder with depressive features. But below it, other papers I'd never seen. 3 amended reports, each signed by Dr. Mercer, and 2 unfamiliar names. The diagnosis evolved each week. Major depressive disorder with psychotic features, schizoaffective disorder, dissociative identity disorder, high suggestibility index. At the bottom of the latest document, approved for Phase 3, cognitive reconstruction / subject group, 9F, perceptual reset trial, consent box checked, obtained through therapeutic persuasion. Then I found a file labeled Research Summary, Neural Behavior Adjustment through Diagnostic Escalation, stamped with the logo of Xericom Therapeutics, a biotech company I remembered seeing in a news article about illegal drug trials. The summary described using false psychiatric diagnoses to justify experimental mood alteration treatments, testing how easily patients could be led to accept new identities and fabricated conditions. The target outcome: permanent cognitive redefinition. At the end of the file was a chart. Success rate for Protocol 9F, 73%. Failure cases marked subject terminated / cognitive awareness compromised. I turned the page and froze. Ethan's name was there. Next to it, the words, scheduled for standard termination and discharge, non-compliant. He wasn't coming back. I grabbed every page I could, stuffed them into my sweatshirt, and snapped blurry photos with my phone. That's when I heard footsteps, that sharp squeak of Lucas's rubber shoes. I ducked behind the cabinet as he entered with Dr. Mercer. Their voices were low, clinical. "She's showing signs of residual awareness," Mercer said. "Then it's time to accelerate conditioning," Lucas replied. I waited until they left, heart pounding so loud I thought the sensors might still be hearing it. The next morning, I acted normal. Smiled, ate the flavorless eggs. When Mercer asked how I felt, I said, "Better." "I think I'm finally seeing clearly," he smiled. Excellent progress. But I'd already emailed the photos to my sister, my old roommate, and a lawyer's office in Ohio with the subject line, "If I disappear, this is why." By noon, my sister arrived with 2 attorneys and a police officer carrying a court order for immediate discharge and preservation of medical files. The staff looked startled, but complied. Dr. Mercer simply stood there, his face expressionless. Only his eyes moved, following me like a scientist observing a test subject escaping the lab. Diane walked me to the lobby, her once gentle eyes now cold and mechanical. "Leaving mid-treatment is unwise," she said softly. "You might lose yourself again." Maybe she meant it as a warning or a threat. They released me that afternoon. Outside, the air felt unreal, too bright, too clean. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep without hearing those reversed murmurs whispering behind my thoughts. The lawyers said most of the documents vanished before they could subpoena them. Whitestone Institute still operates. Their website now features AI-driven cognitive therapy programs. Different name, same address. Sometimes around 3 a.m., I wake up with words on my tongue that don't belong to me. Whispers in a language that feels like code. Syllables pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. And when I close my eyes, I still see that yellow door with the 3 gray lines, glowing faintly in the dark. The tremors started in my right hand last winter. At first, they were mild. Barely enough to notice unless I tried to sign my name or hold a mug of coffee. But over the next 6 months, they got worse. Some mornings, I couldn't even button my shirt. My neurologist, Dr. Fisher, ran every test she could think of. MRIs, blood panels, nerve conduction studies. All of them clean. No sign of Parkinson's. No signs of nerve damage. "Could be psychosomatic," she finally said. "Sometimes trauma you haven't processed comes back through the body." That's what led me here, driving through the back roads of western Massachusetts on a cold, gray October afternoon, headed toward Black Ridge Psychiatric Center, the place I'd spent most of my 17th year. Back then, it was an adolescent behavioral hospital. My parents sent me after my older sister died in a car crash. They said I'd become unstable. Truth was, I was just angry, grieving, and refusing to talk to anyone. Black Ridge had been shut down for over a decade after a funding scandal, but apparently it had reopened recently under new management as a research-based treatment facility. When I called about my old medical records, a polite woman on the phone said they still had the archives and that I could stop by any time. The place looked the same as I remembered. The narrow windows still had that wired glass, the red brick facade still streaked with age and rain. The tall iron gate creaked when I pushed it open. Even the sign, newly polished but carrying the same logo, gave me a chill. Inside, the lobby had been remodeled with white paint, fake plants, and minimalist furniture. But the air still carried that unmistakable blend of disinfectant, floor wax, and faint antiseptic decay that every psych ward seems to share. The receptionist was a jumpy young guy who kept glancing at the security camera above the desk. "Dr. Halverson can see you in 15 minutes, he said, his fingers tapping nervously on the keyboard. While waiting, I noticed something strange. My hand, the one that had been trembling all morning, had gone still. Completely still. It was like the place itself had triggered some deep, subconscious recognition. Dr. Eleanor Halverson appeared right on time. She was in her early 50s, silver hair tied back, her voice calm and precise. "You were a patient here under Dr. Lucian Marks," she said, glancing down at her tablet as we walked through the halls. That name hit me like a memory I didn't want. Dr. Marks, tall, quiet, with those emotionless eyes behind thick glasses. He'd run the adolescent program back then. As we passed through the corridors, flashes came back. The art therapy room where we made clay figures that were always thrown away. The cafeteria where we weren't allowed forks. The medication window with its metal grate. "You were admitted in 2004, Halverson continued. 8-month stay. The notes say you responded well to treatment." I gave a bitter laugh. "That's one way to describe it." She looked uneasy but didn't reply. Her office was in the old isolation wing. I recognized it immediately. The last time I'd been in that hallway, a boy named Tommy Ehlers had been dragged screaming into one of the rooms for refusing his pills. We were told those rooms were soundproof. They weren't. Dr. Halverson handed me a thick manila folder, edges yellowed with time. "Your full file," she said. "We're digitizing the old records, but it's slow work." The first few pages were routine. Admission forms, parental consent, basic psych evaluations calling me oppositional but cooperative. Then I saw the medication list. Alongside antidepressants I recognized, there were unfamiliar entries. Neurosteel 9, Cortolin, RX, 417. The last one repeated daily for 3 months. "What's RX 417? I asked. Halverson leaned closer, squinting at the page. "I'm not familiar. Probably an early name for something standard now. Records from that era weren't well cataloged." Her tone had changed. Too careful, too rehearsed. The dosage increased every 2 weeks. And there were handwritten notes in the margins. Subject shows consistent neural tremor onset, acceptable progression. Increased dose, sustained response at 6-week mark. My right hand began to tremble again, harder this time, the page shaking in my grip. Halverson noticed. "Mr. Kellen, perhaps we should..." But I was already flipping faster through the file. There were pages referencing other patients, all handwritten. One note read, "T. Ehlers, involuntary eye movement confirmed. Continue series." The air in the room felt heavier, like the oxygen had turned thick. Then I found a document labeled Trial Cohort D, Long-Term Observation. There were 12 names, mine among them. Next to each was a column titled Persistent Effects. Every single entry had been blacked out with heavy marker. But on one page, the redaction wasn't complete. Held up to the light, I could just make out faint impressions of words beneath the ink. Neurological damage. Irreversible. Pending liability. Dr. Halverson stood abruptly. "I need to make a phone call," she said, her voice trembling now. "These files shouldn't even exist in this format." "What do you mean?" I asked. She didn't answer, just turned her back, whispering into her cell phone in low, clipped tones. That's when a few loose pages slipped out of the folder and fell onto the floor. They looked different. Thinner paper, typewritten, carbon copies. One was a consent form, but my parents' signatures weren't on it. Instead, the form listed, Guardian of Record, Dr. Lucian Marks, and next to it, checked in neat pen, temporary medical custody granted for clinical trial purposes. I felt my pulse hammering. My parents had visited me every week that first month, until they were told my emotional volatility made visits unsafe. That was probably when they filed this. Those first 72 hours of evaluation were enough time to make me a ward of the institution, at least on paper. Halverson turned back. "Mr. Kellen, Please hand me the folder." Her professional mask was cracking. "You weren't supposed to see those." But I already had. Another memo had the letterhead of a pharmaceutical company called Helvian Biotech, discussing early results of behavioral neuromodulation trials. It read, "Adolescent subjects show exceptional adaptability. Minimal oversight from regulatory bodies expected due to institutional classification." I looked up at her. "You knew." She froze. Then quietly, "I started here only 4 years ago." When we reopened, we found dozens of boxes in the sub-basement. Old files, half destroyed by water. I've been trying to piece together what happened, but most of the electronic data was wiped long ago. Her eyes softened, full of something like shame. "What you're holding might be the only remaining evidence." The tremor had spread up my arm now, muscle twitching visibly through my sleeve. "There were others," she continued. "Former patients who've come back. Same symptoms. Tremors, seizures, memory gaps. But without concrete documentation, no one can prove anything." I thought about calling the police right then. But what would I say? Experiments from 2 decades ago with half the evidence missing, and the main doctor either dead or untouchable. Instead, I asked quietly, "Do you have the names of the others?" "I can't give you names," she said, shaking her head. "But there's a support group in Hartford. Survivors of institutional harm. They meet Wednesdays. Someone there might know what to do with those papers." She glanced at the door nervously. "Security cameras in this wing are under maintenance," she added. "If anyone asks, you were never here." While she stood watch, I used her office copier to make duplicates of everything. The sound of the machine echoed in the sterile room. Click, whir, print, like a heartbeat counting down. Before I left, Halverson handed me a Post-it note. Written on it was a name, Dr. Martin Kepler, and an address 2 hours north near Albany. "Marx's research partner," she whispered. "Still alive. Mild dementia. But he remembers things. His daughter called once, looking for records. Maybe he kept some. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've found 29 former patients, all from the same years. Every one of them has some neurological issue. Tremors, tics, uncontrollable spasms. We filed a class action suit with a Boston firm that specializes in institutional abuse. Dr. Kepler's daughter let us search her father's attic. Inside were stacks of notebooks, fragile and dust-covered, filled with data logs from Project Restrain 9, the official name of the trial we'd unknowingly been part of. The files described RX-417 as a neural compliance stabilizer, designed to reduce aggression and induce long-term docility through permanent modification of dopamine receptors. Our symptoms were literally listed as acceptable collateral results. The biotech company, Helvian, quietly dissolved in 2009 after a series of unrelated lawsuits. But 3 executives are still alive and subpoenaed. The case is crawling forward, but it's moving. Some nights, my right hand still jerks so violently that I can't sleep. Other nights, I dream of the isolation rooms, the sound of Tommy's voice echoing through the vents. But we have the proof now. We're not crazy. It happened. Dr. Halverson still works at Blackridge, though the facility has rebranded again under a new name, the Blackridge Institute for Neuro-Wellness. She calls sometimes to check on me. Last week, she said something that's been haunting me ever since. The real horror isn't what they did to you, David. It's that, at the time, they truly believed they were helping. I worked as a patient liaison at Crestwood Behavioral Health Center in Oregon. 6 years of paperwork, discharge forms, and family consultations had made me good at spotting inconsistencies, especially in transfer files. Crestwood wasn't some shadowy government lab. It was just a mid-sized psychiatric facility. Fluorescent lights, peeling beige paint, burnt coffee smell. The kind of place that existed in quiet towns and handled the forgotten people of society. In March 2024, my job was my entire life. After my marriage ended, I had nothing to go home to. I'd spend late nights combing through files, making sure every patient was accounted for. That's probably why I was the first to notice when Ethan Cole disappeared. His mother, Margaret Cole, came to my office on a gray Wednesday afternoon, clutching a folder of paperwork. Her son had been battling severe depression and had stayed with us for nearly 2 months. The staff had told her that Ethan was being transferred to Red River Recovery, a specialized treatment program in Washington. But when she called Red River to ask about visitation, they had no record of Ethan Cole. Not in their system, not on their transfer logs, not even as a pending admission. At first, I thought it was just a clerical error. Happens all the time, right? So I called Red River myself, then the other nearby facilities, then every psychiatric hospital within 100 miles. Nothing. No Ethan Cole. The transport company, Wellpath Medical Transit, confirmed they had picked him up at 3:28 a.m. 2 Saturdays prior. The driver's name on the transfer form was Ray Nolan. But when I asked for his contact details, the supervisor told me Ray had quit 2 days later and left no forwarding address. That night, I stayed at my desk until nearly midnight. I pulled up every after-hours patient transfer we'd had in the last year. There were 11, all between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always on weekends. Every one of them listed Wellpath Transit as the transport provider. Every one of them was signed off by either Dr. Alston or Dr. Morris, both longtime psychiatrists at Crestwood. Only problem? Neither of them had been on call during those nights. Someone had been forging their signatures. The next morning, I started cross-referencing names from our records with local missing person reports. By day 3, I found 4 matches, all patients who were supposedly transferred. All of them gone without a trace. Their families had received phone calls, calm, rehearsed voices telling them their loved ones needed a few weeks without visitors. One family had even received a letter, typed on Crestwood letterhead, signed in their daughter's handwriting. Except, she'd always signed her name with a heart above the I. This one didn't. I went straight to my supervisor, Leonard Pierce, with everything I had. Forged signatures, mismatched records, missing patients. Leonard just sat there, fingers steepled under his chin, listening like I was pitching him a movie script. When I finished, he told me I'd been overworking, that maybe the stress of my divorce was getting to me. He even offered me 2 weeks paid leave, saying it would help me clear my head. But I saw something flicker in his expression when I mentioned the transport company's name. Wellpath. He knew. I could feel it. After that day, things got weird. My keycard stopped working in certain areas of the hospital. Files disappeared from my desk. Co-workers who used to chat with me at lunch suddenly avoided me like I was contagious. Dr. Morris, one of the psychiatrists whose name had been forged, pulled me aside in the parking garage one evening. She spoke softly, like someone terrified of being overheard. "Don't dig any deeper, Hannah. You don't understand what they're doing here." The next morning, I learned she had taken a sudden leave of absence. Family emergency, they said. She never came back. A few nights later, my phone rang at 2:14 a.m. blocked number. At first, nothing but breathing. Then a distorted voice, synthetic, cold, said, "Stop asking questions about transfers. You're not protecting anyone. Think about your safety on those late drives home." The line went dead. When I left for work that morning, both my car tires were slashed. Security footage for that section of the lot? Corrupted, apparently, and taped under my windshield wiper, was a Crestwood patient wristband. Name, Ethan Cole. Date, March 11th. Dried blood along the edge. That was it for me. I drove straight to the Eugene Police Department with a box of photocopied records and the bracelet sealed in a plastic bag. At first, the detective seemed concerned. He asked detailed questions about dates, signatures, the hospital chain of command. But then he got a call, stepped outside. When he came back, his tone was completely different. He asked why I was stealing confidential medical files, why I'd been contacting other facilities with false patient information. He said Crestwood's legal team had called about an emotionally unstable employee fabricating stories after a mental breakdown. They even had a psychiatric evaluation with my forged signature, claiming I was unfit for duty. He told me, kindly but firmly, that I should leave before things got complicated. His hand rested on his holster as he said it. That night, I was officially fired. Gross misconduct, breach of confidentiality, termination effective immediately. My bank account was frozen pending investigation. The police wouldn't return my calls, and Margaret Cole, Ethan's mother, withdrew her complaint. She told a friend of mine that Ethan had called her and said he was fine, except that number wasn't his. It was traced to an unlisted business line registered to WellPath Medical Logistics. 3 months later, I was in Arizona under a new name. I thought it was over, until I saw a small local news story about a biohazard disposal plant in Nevada being investigated for unauthorized human tissue shipments. The company had contracts with multiple psychiatric facilities, including Crestwood. The investigation was closed within days. The whistleblower, a truck driver named Ray Nolan, died in a highway accident 2 days before he was scheduled to testify. Yes, the same Ray who signed Ethan's transfer paperwork. I've changed states twice since then. New phone, new job, no social media. But sometimes, I still get emails with no sender, just one line in the body. Crestwood still transfers patients on weekends. I don't know if it's a warning or a confession, but I do know this. The real horror isn't always what hides in the dark. Sometimes, it's what happens under fluorescent lights at 3 a.m., buried beneath policy, procedure, and forged signatures, when people stop being patients and start being inventory. I started working as an orderly at St. Mark's Regional Hospital in Ohio back in the spring of 2017, a few months after my marriage fell apart. It wasn't exactly a dream job, but it covered rent and came with health insurance, which at that point in my life was all I cared about. Most days were routine, changing bed linens, wheeling patients for scans, scrubbing gurneys. The place was built in the 1950s, with those yellow brick walls and narrow hallways that always smelled faintly of bleach and old air conditioning. After about 6 months, I knew every shortcut in that place, which elevator jammed on weekends, which vending machine actually took coins, and where to sneak a 5-minute nap on night shifts. But one Wednesday in November, my routine broke, and my life has never felt normal since. That morning, my supervisor, Tom Rourke, a heavyset guy with a smoker's cough, told me to follow him to check ventilation issues in the basement. I'd been down there before, storage, laundry, boiler rooms, but that day he led me past areas I'd never seen. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. The hum of machines, distant chatter, all just faded away. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, making the concrete walls pulse with shifting shadows. After nearly 10 minutes of winding through empty corridors, we stopped at a steel door labeled only C9 in chipped red paint. Tom slid an old keycard through a slot. The lock buzzed, and the door creaked open. What hit me first was the smell. a strange mix of antiseptic and dust, like a place frozen in time. The walls inside were padded, floor to ceiling, thick gray foam that absorbed every sound. Each door along the hall had rubber seals and reinforced windows. Tom must have noticed my hesitation. "Old psych unit," he said quickly. "They used to run noise isolation therapy down here. Abandoned since the early 2000s. He didn't look at me when he said it. We were supposed to check vents for mold buildup. I held the flashlight while he checked things off his clipboard, muttering about basketball scores like this was all completely normal. But one of the rooms made me stop cold. Deep scratch marks along the lower padding, torn through layers of foam down to the metal frame, like someone had clawed at it for days. Tom ignored it, acting like he didn't even see. That night, I couldn't shake the image from my head. Around 2 a.m., when the hospital quieted down to a hum, I decided to go back. I told myself it was curiosity, but truthfully, it felt like something was calling me back there. I grabbed a flashlight from the janitor's closet and made my way down to the basement alone. The air grew colder with every step. When I reached the C9 door, I noticed fresh fingerprints in the dust on the handle, like someone had been there recently. I stood still for a minute, listening. At first, nothing. Then, 3 soft taps echoed through the door. Pause. 3 more. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Wasn't random. It was deliberate, like someone trapped, asking to be let out. I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear faint, slow breathing on the other side, shallow and rhythmic, too steady to be imagination. My heart raced. I pulled back, shining the flashlight around. There were fresh scratch marks around the lock and scuff marks on the floor. Footprints, recent ones. The place wasn't abandoned at all. I took a few photos on my phone and left before my courage ran out. The next day, I went to Linda Harris, head of maintenance. She'd been at St. Mark's since the late 80s. When I showed her the photos, her face drained of color. She shut her office door and whispered, "Don't ever go back down there." Then she told me something the hospital never put on record. In 2015, 2 years before I was hired, a patient named Harold Benton escaped supervision during a fire drill and somehow made it into that old C9 wing. He barricaded himself inside for 3 days before security broke through. When they found him, he was catatonic, staring at the wall, whispering something they couldn't understand. They moved him to the psychiatric ward upstairs. According to Linda, every night since then, Harold taps the same pattern on his door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. That night, I had to see for myself. During my graveyard shift, I went up to the 4th floor psych unit. I knew the nurses there and waved like I was doing a routine check. I found Harold's room, 4C22, at the end of the hallway. Through the reinforced glass, I saw him sitting cross-legged on his bed, staring at the wall. His hair was gray and tangled, skin pale as parchment. When he saw me, he slowly stood up, shuffled toward the door, and tapped 3 times on the glass. Pause. 3 more taps. His lips moved. No sound came through the thick door, but I could read the words. Still below. The next few days, I started digging. Using my staff login, I pulled up old maintenance and renovation logs. That's when things stopped making sense. The C9 wing had supposedly been renovated in 2014, with new equipment and something labeled containment infrastructure. The work orders were signed by a Dr. Leonard Gray, listed as Director of Behavioral Research. But there was no employee file, no payroll record, no tax entry. Nothing. When I asked HR about him, they looked at me like I was crazy. "We've never had a Dr. Gray," they said. I found purchase orders too, Ones for industrial restraints, oxygen tanks, and high-dose sedatives. The quantities were enough to treat dozens of people, except no such patients were ever listed in our system. That's when I knew. Whatever was going on down there wasn't therapy. It was something else. 2 nights later, I went back to C9 with a crowbar from my truck. The moment I reached the door, the tapping started again. Faster, more desperate this time. I jammed the crowbar under the frame and forced it open. The lock finally snapped, echoing down the corridor. The smell hit me again. That same sterile rot, like chemicals and decay. Inside, the room looked untouched except for one thing. The lower corner of the wall had been peeled back, revealing a ventilation duct that wasn't sealed like the others. When I shone my flashlight inside, I froze. There was another room beyond it, smaller. Bare concrete walls, surgical equipment scattered everywhere. IV poles, heart monitors, even a reclining chair with leather restraints bolted to the floor. Pinned to the wall were dozens of patient photos, admission-style portraits, each marked with a date and file number. I recognized one face immediately, Harold Benton. But others were recent, patients I'd seen just last week. My phone's camera light flickered as I tried to take a photo, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy. I turned around and saw Tom Rourke standing in the doorway, holding a flashlight. Behind him were 2 hospital security guards, and a man in a lab coat I'd never seen before. "Mr. Lawson," the man said calmly, "you've wandered into a restricted section." He introduced himself as Dr. Peter Sloan, head of psychiatric services. His tone was almost friendly. Too friendly. He told me I'd stumbled upon a specialized sensory therapy program that required confidentiality. He even offered me a promotion if I agreed to keep quiet. But while he spoke, I noticed the guards tightening their stance, one's hand hovering over his taser. Something in my gut screamed run. I nodded along, pretended to understand, apologized. After a tense silence, they escorted me back upstairs, told me to take a few days off. That night, I packed my bags and drove 3 states away. Before leaving, I uploaded all my photos and videos to multiple cloud accounts and sent copies to a journalist friend. She promised to look into it. A week later, she stopped responding. A month later, a local news piece aired. St. Mark's Regional receives multi-million-dollar grant for psychiatric expansion. The article mentioned new subterranean treatment facilities. No details. I looked up Harold Benton's name a few months after that. The hospital listed him as deceased, complications from long-term care. Now I work at a small clinic in Idaho, far from any large medical complex. But some nights, when everything is silent, I swear I still hear it. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. And I can't help wondering, if Harold was saying, "still below," then who or what is still down there? Night shifts at psychiatric hospitals teach you things textbooks never mention. By 25, I'd just graduated nursing school with a mountain of student loans and no clue how to manage real patients. So when Maplewood Behavioral Center in Indiana offered me a full-time position in their psychiatric wing, I thought it was my lucky break. 6 months later, I realized luck had nothing to do with it. Maplewood was one of those hospitals that time forgot. Built in the 1960s, long corridors with yellowed tiles, humming lights, and an air so thick with disinfectant it burned your nose. But it paid well. And in 2019, that mattered more than comfort. My supervisor, Janet Wells, was a veteran nurse. Stern, sharp-eyed, always carrying a clipboard like it was an extension of her body. She just promoted me to night lead nurse, which meant I got to supervise medication rounds and write the morning reports. That Friday, my roommate and fellow nurse, Allie, brought home a cheap bottle of champagne. We toasted to my promotion and joked about finally affording groceries that didn't come in bulk discount boxes. I remember feeling like I was finally getting my life together. That lasted about 48 hours. The patient arrived on a rainy Sunday night. Ethan Cole, 34, admitted for acute behavioral disturbance. His file said he'd been experiencing auditory hallucinations and dissociative episodes following a car crash that killed his younger sister. Nothing unusual, not for us. He was quiet, polite, calm, the kind of patient who made night shifts bearable. When I did my rounds, he always greeted me softly, sometimes asking for water or a blanket. His eyes, though, dark, glassy, and fixed too long, made me uneasy. That December, the building's heating struggled against the cold. Every sound carried through the empty halls, the buzz of lights, the wheels of my medication cart squeaking, the occasional hum from the vents. By 2 a.m., I was halfway through my rounds when I reached Ethan's room, C214. He was sitting upright in bed, perfectly still, hands folded in his lap. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked gently. He didn't answer at first, just watched me as I poured his medication. The fluorescent light above flickered, washing the room in brief pulses of white. "This one's for the anxiety," I said, holding up the small blue pill. Then he spoke. "This one's for the anxiety." Same tone, same inflection, same pause between words. But it was my voice. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. But when I looked up, his lips were still moving, matching every subtle rhythm of my speech, even the tiny laugh I'd made under my breath. It wasn't just mimicry, it was playback, like he'd recorded me without any device. I froze, the medication cup trembling in my hand. He copied that too, his own hand, shaking at the same frequency, the same motion. I forced a calm tone. "Mr. Cole, please take your medication." He tilted his head slightly, the angle unnatural, like his neck joints didn't follow the same rules as ours. Then, in my voice again, my exact voice, doubled and distorted, he said, "Mr. Cole, please take your medication." The sound was layered, like multiple recordings of me playing slightly out of sync. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. When I reached for the call button, his arm shot forward and grabbed my wrist. His grip was clinical, not forceful, not loose, just measured. Each finger applied identical pressure, like a machine calibrated for precision. "Protocol for aggressive behavior," he whispered, again in my voice. "Requires immediate documentation." Then he laughed. Not his laugh. Mine. My nervous laugh from earlier that night when Janet joked about our coffee tasting like bleach. The sound coming from his throat, warped, metallic, made my stomach twist. I yanked my arm free and stumbled backward. Ethan stood, moving in short, jerking motions, like frames missing from a video. Then he began speaking backward, syllables in reverse, but somehow clear. My words replayed from moments earlier, scrambled into something inhuman. When I screamed, he screamed, perfectly mirroring me. Pitch, breath, even the slight rasp in my throat. By the time I reached the hallway, Marcus, the night security guard, was sprinting toward me. "Room C214, I gasped. He's not human! Something's wrong!" Marcus rushed in first. I followed a second later. Ethan was lying in bed, eyes closed, pulse normal. The monitor beside him beeped in steady rhythm. He looked asleep, peaceful. Marcus shot me a skeptical look. "You sure you're not just overtired, kid?" The next morning, I insisted they review the camera footage. Maplewood records every patient room for safety reasons. When the tech pulled it up, my stomach dropped. The video showed me standing in Ethan's room alone, talking to empty air. No movement from him. No sounds. At one point, I flinched backward as if startled, but Ethan remained perfectly still, eyes closed. The timestamp matched exactly. I wrote my incident report 3 times before Janet arrived to review it. She read it silently, her expression unreadable, before sliding a new document toward me. Voluntary psychological assessment. "Sometimes the night shifts get to people," she said quietly. "Take some time off." I refused to sign at first, insisting something was wrong with Ethan. She didn't argue. She just showed me her tablet, an email already drafted to HR about my erratic and paranoid behavior. I signed. The following 2 weeks were a blur. Sleep came in short, restless bursts. Every sound, my own breathing, the creak of the floorboards, felt like an imitation of itself. I couldn't stop replaying that night. The mimicry, the voices, the footage showing me alone. Allie tried to be supportive, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes, that silent, careful doubt. I started digging into Ethan Cole's background, public records, old news articles, anything. His ex-girlfriend, a woman named Cora, had written on a forgotten forum months before his admission, posts about Ethan repeating her words during arguments in voices that weren't his. She said she'd recorded it once, but when she played it back, it was her voice on the tape, arguing alone. Her account had been deleted weeks later. I couldn't stay away. One icy night in January, I parked across from Maplewood just after 2 a.m. The windows on the psych wing were dim, except for the faint blue glow from the security monitors. Then I saw him. Ethan, dressed in plain clothes, holding a clipboard, walking calmly through the main entrance. Not as a patient, as staff. I hit record on my phone, zoomed in through the windshield. He swiped an ID badge at the staff door. The reader flashed green. My heart hammered as I called the hospital security desk. Marcus answered. "Marcus, it's me." "There's an intruder. Ethan Cole. He's inside right now." A pause, then his weary voice. "There's no one unauthorized in the building. All staff accounted for. You need to rest." When I checked my phone footage later, the video showed only the entrance doors, empty. No one entering. No one at all. The next day, I called Samantha, another nurse from my unit. She quit 3 days earlier without notice. When she finally answered, her voice trembled. "Whatever's happening there, they're not patients," she said quietly. Then she hung up. When I drove to her apartment, her roommate said Samantha had moved back home to Wisconsin, left without saying goodbye. After that, I stopped answering Maplewood's calls. They mailed me 3 letters, a request to return, a warning, and finally termination papers. I work at a pet clinic now. It's quiet. The animals don't speak, don't echo, don't make me doubt what's real. But I still think about that night, about Ethan's voice, my voice, whispering through the sterile air of that hospital, about Janet's maiden name, which I learned later while updating paperwork, Wells Crawford. That same name appeared in a 1986 medical journal describing a discontinued experiment at Maplewood Behavioral titled Auditory Identity Reflection in Isolated Subjects. The lead researcher? Dr. B. Crawford. The study was shut down after ethical violations. Records sealed. Now sometimes, late at night, when I'm locking up the clinic, I hear a faint sound behind me. Not quite footsteps, not quite breathing, just a delayed echo, one that starts a second after I move. And when I whisper, I swear something whispers back,